Hello everyone, this is basically another podcast episode. Originally I wanted this to be a quick snappy video where I told you what decks you should run if you're going into circuit opener season. And so I think what I ended up making is a fun hour-long conversation between me and three elite tier players that was just a blast. But if what you really care about is, hey Jeff, tell me what decks I should be thinking about or testing against for my circuit opener, my national championship, my continental prep. Here's the list that we came up with. On the Corp side, Loki, AgInfusion, Deers PE, Prana PE or Jinsei PE, Econ Asmari, Fast Fans Outfit, Sports Metal, Seamless Precision Design, and then something with Ob, maybe Rush, maybe Combo, maybe Kill. In terms of runner deck, we thought Hoshiko and Grey Tongue are basically the go-to runner decks, with 419, Tag Me Zaya, and APOC Anarch, probably Hoshiko, kind of a tier below that. And we talk a little bit, actually for much longer than basically anyone else, we talk about why you shouldn't play Shaper at all, with no mention of smoke. But I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer. I should plug next weekend on the 20th, I will be running a circuit opener in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The link for that is in the description. If that's too far to make it, but you are on the eastern seaboard of the U.S., there's also a New York City circuit opener that I was another group of snare bears are running in New York City. The link for that is below. And then also, Whiteblade, aka Eric, is part of the team running Cascadia, which is going to be an event in Seattle. I will be there, and the link for that and the plug for that will be in the description as well. Hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening.
Hey everybody, I am Janktivist. I don't know what else to say.
Holy fuck, here we go.
Yeah, don't know what else to say. Was it second or third in Worlds 2021?
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
Man, we can't hype ourselves at all.
Okay, we're all good at Netrunner. Fucking Patrick's like a former world champion, so like we're a bunch of good Netrunner players.
Well, you know, I worked hard at becoming a good Netrunner player, so I'll hype myself. I came second in American Continentals that year, third at Worlds, made the cut in the most recent American Continentals, came in second at the first CBI tournament.
Thank you. That's the thing that Iran should have remembered and was much more recent, and it's also still, all of those are a good achievement. Thanks, John. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Patrick from the UK. I'm RotomAppliance online. I do still play on JNet, so you might have played me if you're listening. Yeah, that's it. That's fine. That's all I need to say.
I don't consider online events real events, so if we discount all the stuff John did, I have a more impressive resume because I recently top 16 in-person Worlds, and that's all I'll say.
And that's Eric Whiteblade, for those of you who don't recognize that voice.
You listen to the shout-out if you listen to this. It's the crowd.
Put out an episode, Eric. Put out an episode.
We recorded an episode.
Okay. Well, to respect both the viewers and John's time, we should probably start talking about this meta. I guess very briefly, like, how are people feeling about this meta?
I think it's pretty good overall. I mean, you think the previous meta was would have been R plus, Nanny AgInfusion, and everyone's still playing the Endurance, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, also it was World Tree Woo. Like it was World Tree Woo, Endurance Anarch, R plus with Drago.
And 419 with no new cards because it's just a really good fundamentals deck.
I mean, I think this format is just more enjoyable to play in, I think, for the vast majority of players in the previous format. I think it's a strict upgrade.
Yeah, I meant more, do we feel like this meta is solved and that we have exact answers for what the best decks are, or do we feel like there's room for innovation in this meta?
Nobody's playing in events. Like, what do you, like, no one who's playing in events right now? I don't know. Like, I mean, it's hard, like, the problem with, like, not to get too soapboxy here, but, like, I think there's, when I think about, like, like we're all part of the same testing group. For those who are listening, right? We all had circuit openers coming up. We didn't do any testing for circuit openers. You know, like if three, like we're gonna have nationals coming up in a month or 2 months, right? Like,
Yep.
what do you think is the level of, like, at least from the established test? Like, do you think NWE is doing testing for the circuit openers?
No, I think Unbanned has been putting up a lot of results. It's just that they're doing some brewing, though I think they've got a pretty brew happy group.
I think also the thing about the Unbanned is, like, when do those guys play in person? Because it's like right now, like if you look at the people who play Unbanned, it's like they play in the AMTs, but then like Will is the only one who goes to, like, at least events that are going on Always Be Running, because Will goes to like the Pacific Northwest stuff, but like Brandon, for example, the King, I mean, there's not events in Toronto. Bridgman lives in, this is a small aside, but have you seen the Harry Potter CCG content that Bridgman does?
I haven't. I should definitely check it out though, because I've
It's
been trying
actually
to absorb different card game content stuff.
It's actually he's really like interesting, engaging to watch, but it's funny because like he'll be like, oh yeah, like I'm playing like the Professor McGonagall combo deck or whatever. Like it's actually the funniest thing. But like Bridgman isn't playing events, who is arguably one of the best Netrunner players playing right now, at least if you look at 2022. Sebastian K, maybe he is, I don't know. I don't see him in any of the Always Be Running results. So
I definitely have him as a result from an accelerated meta test, but
that's online. My point is that it's online.
I think,
online,
I mean, I think Unbanned has been doing a lot of testing. Will's stream, Sokka's stream yesterday. I mean, he's just been getting back into it after a couple months out, but he was also saying that he and Brandon had been brewing a deck that's supposedly pretty wild. That Brandon, I think, is taking to a tournament this weekend, maybe. I personally think that the ban list did something kind of interesting. I'm not sure if interesting is the exact right word, but in my recollection anyway, you know, we have a banned list and then people sort of figure out a way at some point to pivot to something new and still pretty wild, even with the restrictions. I feel like this ban list actually did something different where I haven't really been seeing people pivot to something new and wild or having figured that out yet, but they're pivoting to what I feel are in, you know, in spirit, you know, older archetypes and just trying to kind of retrofit some older archetypes with newer cards. There's a couple exceptions to this, right? So I think Grey Tongue, for example, is an exception to this, right? Only because Essa is so new and, you know, there's that whole, you know, let me do core damage to myself idea. But so far as the other major decks are concerned, the ones that are just winning on JNet, I'm seeing that retrofit in action. I'm not sure if you all agree or what your all thoughts are on that.
I mean, I think from a competitive perspective, when I think about Borealis as a full cycle, I mean, like, okay, so the Mark stuff is just not as good as 419. The charge stuff doesn't work. The Essa stuff does work and is arguably one of the best runners in the format, and I think R Plus had to go away for Essa to be good for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, agreed.
And then on the Corp side, it's like, okay, well, you have the Jinteki stuff, which is the PE deck is a completely new deck. I would argue that has not existed before. With it has existed in some forms, but like Keeling, Bladderwort, like asset kill is an archetype that has not existed in Jinteki arguably since IG, and I think it's functionally different than IG was in like 2015 or 2016.
Yeah, I mean the bioethics, the bioethics archetypes, right? I mean
exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, those are played out of more than just IG, right? Those are played out of RP a little bit too. If I'm remembering right.
No, they were, but I feel like though, like the asset deck is like more, I would argue, in the vein of IG49 than like the RP bioethics hostile infrastructure. Like for example, like you can play hostile architecture right now. But
yeah, I mean, but that's a good example of me of like a pretty innovative, but a retrofit, right? Where you know we have seen something like that before. Meanwhile, I think in R Plus with Drago, we've seen things like that before, but not quite that just yet. Even though like R Plus Drago R Plus wasn't particularly imaginative. I think it was still doing something pretty new.
I guess in that sense, yes. But when I think of like decks that are using the new cards from Parhelia, like from Borealis or whatever, like I think it's just Jinteki and Anarch, and arguably HB. No one's playing Thule, but I think that deck works. But yeah, I mean the Orb is also good, and Orb is arguably like a new thing that I think it's all muddled together because like there's this question of like, well, do you count? Are you counting from the beginning of Midnight Suns, or are you counting from the beginning of Parhelion? Because Parhelion just sort of didn't introduce anything new. It just like bolstered the existing stuff in Midnight Sun.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, what's Ob doing now that Ob wasn't trying to do a cycle ago?
I think of it all as one cycle, but I guess you're counting it as 2 cycles.
I guess it's Midnight Sun and Parhelion, right?
I actually want to gather us back a little bit and move a little bit to just talking a little bit about the decks. I tend to think a lot about the meta as like this deck is setting a pace, and then this is the response to that, and then a lot of the other things come as like, you know, it's like you have a first order best deck, and then you have responses to that, and then responses to the responses kind of thing. Do we feel like that's the meta, or do we think it's like you have a couple of good options on that as like a primary first string deck?
I think you have to have an answer for ESSA right now as the Corp.
Okay.
Like just people playing ESSA. I think this is also recent, like probably in the last month. Like Grey Tongue got published, and then everyone realized, oh, ESSA's really good. And the ESSA deck is also pretty malleable in the sense that like you just run the Marrows, the Running Hearts, and all these cards, and then you can like slot things in. So like you can play Fermenters, you can play Botulists if you want, but you just need a plan for ESSA. Like if you don't have a plan for ESSA, you're just gonna get run over. And there are certain things that are good against ESSA and bad against ESSA and whatever. But I just think like the before it's like you just sort of assumed that the runners were being like this is all value focused and just like focused on like beating you over the head with like money and efficient breakers and like all that stuff, like Hoshiko or 4-9. But now you have to play against a runner who like actually has this sort of like linear win condition in the sense of like if you don't ice HQ, you're just gonna get Chashushka like a lot, which is bad.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think ESSA is like the first viable runner deck we've had in a while that like is actually stronger in the early mid game than they are in the late game. Obviously, depending on how you build it, and that does require Corps to act really differently. Whereas before, Corps are often about like, oh, I need to like, you know, rush out before the value engine of the runner gets set up. ESSA is kind of against ESSA, it's almost the like, can I survive the onslaught? And if I do, I've probably got a good chance. But or at least that's one way to approach it.
Ridiculous turn ones I've ever seen. That deck, you know, I've had games where they've sort of had 3 turns and they've only got 10 cards left in their stack. That's probably an exaggeration, but it feels absolutely absurd in the early game. I'm curious what is sort of good against ESSA. Is it just stuff that can make the Chachuska difficult, like border control, Crisium, what have you?
I think the 2 things that make the ESSA really dislikes is defensive agendas that have abilities that you like costs to steal. So like Bologna, Obakata, SDS. And I would argue net damage.
Okay.
Yeah, I think S is pretty tough to play against either of the big PE decks. Tough to play against Thule also, and you know has an okay, but I think not great matchup against you know the Asmari deck, the Laura Asmari deck that we've been playing a bit. I've been playing against ESSA quite a bit with that deck. I've definitely won many more games against ESSA than I've lost, only because I feel like that deck is pretty resilient. I'm not super afraid of chest jukas or whatever it's called, or anything like that, because I can always follow it up with usually like a double Econ Warfare HHN, and then, you know, cool, you put some cards in the trash. But I mean, chances are I'm going to win this game now.
Yeah, I think when I see Like, I think, for example, a deck that's well positioned against Essa is AgInfusion. Because, like, it's hard for them to get the central accesses for Chashushka and for Finality. You can boop them into other servers. They have the Anarch breakers and no, like, really tools to get around them, so, like, they have to pay, like, lots of money for Anansi or whatever. And then they have to steal the Obacadas. The problem is you have to... So, like, something people say is that, like, well, S is actually good in those matchups because you can just play a Marrow and then you have 7 hand size. And I think the reality is your deck construction is predicated on the idea that you're getting these sabotages and playing these cards that have core damage as cost. So if your plan is just to install a Marrow and then never play any of these other cards, you just have all these blank cards in your deck.
You give up too much, don't you? You can't do that.
Yeah. I just don't think it works.
Well, it depends. It depends what the Corp is doing. I mean, that PE matchup is tough, but where I've been able to win games against PE, and it's not an altogether losing matchup, is, I have gotten that Marrow down and then hit myself with core damage pretty sparingly, and then just sort of relied on milling out the Corp with, Cheshchushka. I can't say that right. Cheshchukas.
Cheshchushkas? Yeah.
Cheshchuka.
Yeah, and that's been my strategy against those more classic PE decks. Against the Keeling ones, that's a bit of a different story though.
Yeah, I should briefly say, like, there's kind of two different... I mean, they're, like, similar, but they're kind of different. There's the, like, what I guess I have to call P-ass Deer's deck and Jinsei's deck, which, like, I think are, like... They're, like, they rhyme, but they're, like, different decks to some respect. So it's... I don't know. But they're
Can we
both
say
like
Jinsei PE and then, or Jinsei PE and DPE?
DPE is easier to say for me.
Have you ever, Jeff? Have you ever watched the Whitest Kid You Know sketch? Our label is run by homos. This is PS has the same fucking energy as that sketch to me. It's so fucking funny that, like, real people have PS.
Yeah, I gotta type it up in the YouTube description here and get blacklisted from any ads.
That's great.
Yeah, like, these two lists seem like really good responses to me to ESSA, as does the AgInfusion for all the reasons we talked about. I think it's probably worth saying, like, Jinsei claimed to have both the poison and the cure here with their Ma Hoshiko list. And I think we all agree that, like, some version of kind of Reg Hoshiko is the deck, or is a real deck. Sort of, what changes does that deck have to make now that it can't run 2 endurances?
I think Hoshiko is pretty wide open, and I've seen all sorts. So I've seen things like this where you're using Turtle to pressure the Corp, and it's really good against mid-range decks. You can splash, you can do the Turbine Big Rig thing and play Bughalter and, like, Real Breakers, and then you can put in all sorts, can't you? Deuces Wild, you can put in No Free Lunch, you can put in Pinholes. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and it's probably all broadly fine. I like using More as my console, but I've seen Kiko decks, and I think that works as well. I think the Jinsei list is pretty good. It's very, like, it's quite light on basics because it's playing things like Devil Charm, things that just eat up slots really hard. But it's quite a good deck. I found it quite hard to play against. I don't know. I've tried all sorts of things in ESSA. I've played I'm playing a diversion of funds. Sorry, not ESSA, Hoshiko. I'm playing a list with 3 diversion of funds, and it's doing pretty well. So yeah, you can get away with a lot.
This is my, like, complaint that, like, Anarch is broken and Shaper keeps eating bans because Anarch's card pool is so busted, where, like, oh yeah, they can spend 10 influence on endurance because it solves one problem for them, and it's like, oh yeah, you can run, like, 6 to 10 cute cards, spend 15 influence on 3 cards, and, like, still have such a good foundation that you're really strong. But yeah, I think it's to me, like, some Hoshiko deck, whether it's the Turtle Hoshiko deck, a Turbine one, though I'm less sold on Turbine actually doing anything. When we look at the list of corps we're going to talk about, it's like only Loki Ag I think really cares about ice, or cares about their ice being like big. Maybe the Economist Mari deck, but my guess is that deck operates a little bit differently. But yeah, I think
the Asmari deck is pretty good against Hoshiko with it plays Turbine. I think that's just too slow.
Yeah, agreed. I like Turbine, and if you get it up and you still have time, you are just going to steamroll the Corp at that point. But to get the entire rig assembled and Turbine's expensive too. It just hasn't really been panning out the way that I thought it might.
I think we're like a rotation behind. Like I think next rotation will actually be nuts. Especially because you can't run the conspiracy breakers anymore. Like I think when the trade-off is, I actually think like next rotation will be pretty busted. Because Hard Hitting News is gonna go, and so will the conspiracy breakers.
Yeah.
I would say one thing about Hoshiko, which is that when you play against Hoshiko right now, and you're sitting down at like in a tournament, you have fucking no clue what they're doing. Like, it can be like 6 different decks, right? And like it's like you just don't know. Like you play against you. If someone sits down for me and puts Essa down, I have a rough idea of what's gonna happen here. But like if you play against Hoshiko, you just have no idea how many hippos are they on, what's their console, how are they breaking
hippos. 3.
I've seen plenty of Hoshiko lists that are not running 3. So it's like I just think the there are some threads of commonality between all these lists, but also the lists are so flexible that like especially at like tournaments, you just don't know. Like people can mix and match and edit. It's not like it's really up in the air of what you're actually going to see when you play against Hoshiko. Like you just have no idea right now. Like it could be anything.
I agree. You don't know whether to protect against APOC. You don't know whether to plan around Turtle. Just not a clue.
Yeah, you got him just like. I mean, I think this is one of the things I feel about Corps in this format, which is that like the sort of like you can't. You have to have like a game plan that you're executing as the Corp. You can't like be responsive because the field on the runner side is too wide for you to actually be responsive.
Right, but that's always like theoretically always been the case, right? I mean,
I feel like that's not true.
The Corp is the one that's always actually been on the clock. The Corp is the one that has to act and make things happen, otherwise the runner wins.
I feel like that's not true of decks like PD, for example.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Like, I think
like PD, for example. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Like PD can set up an effectively impenetrable remote, right? With the Manic Arms, Anoetic Void, like 2 pieces of ice. Like there was no deck in that format that could actually keep up with that full setup. And so like the best runner deck was like, oh, I need to just keep constantly generating value so I can like keep up and just stop them from ever getting that actually set up. And so the way you played PD was just responding to where the runner was going to get their maximal amount of value, and eventually you could outvalue the runner if you got given enough time and just force things through. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
I think there is a lot of like Corp decks that are kind of reactive in how they play. Like I think, for example, like old school Outfit before the new fast advance changes, PD could play very differently dependent. Like one of the things that one of the reasons PD was so good, it was so flexible in like how it defended its servers and how it could actually build a scoring plan, versus like PE assets where it's like, okay, I'm just installing 3 things on turn 1, or like I think the Laura Asmari deck is kind of like closer to the more flexible side, but even then I think it's still like the Laura Asmari deck really has to execute its game plan of like pushing the cryptos early, because if it just sits back and like tries to be reactive, it's gonna get blown out. Versus like with PD, like you could try and fish for APOC and like put the border controls down and like make that work.
I feel like the Laura Asmari deck just needs to be jamming as often as possible, which is why I'm being pretty resilient. Like yes, I mean no doubt if you can get those early cryptos and get them for maximum value, that's that's huge. But I think just jamming there, because you have your Rashidas, you have your spin doctors, you have your gaslights, right? And then you have the cryptos and everything. And I feel like the deck operates in some ways anyway as PD a little bit in that fashion. And it's also playing the 3 seamless, of course, which makes it feel like that even more.
It's cool that people are actually playing Crypto Crash. I thought Crypto Crash was a card in testing that I thought would not see play at all. So it's
the philosophy on it is I think like in 90% of the cases, Offworld is better than Crypto Crash. But if you're building a deck around the runner being poor and that's how you win, then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's how you want.
well, doesn't it? In this archetype, it's you'd much rather they're both poor instead of both being rich. So it's
Yeah, I think it's just nice. I mean, that's where you want agendas to end up, right? Like not being generically good, but like useful in the specific archetype. It's just nice.
Should we talk about there's like so we kind of talked about a list of decks ahead of time, and there's a couple we haven't talked about yet. We talked about like I think we'd all kind of agree that probably but Loki, AgInfusion, the various versions of PE, and this Econ Warfare as Mari deck are all probably like maybe our 3 favorites. Or
That's
there's 4 of us on the call.
That's not what the tournament data says.
But the tournament data says that Fast Advance Outfit is a really, really good deck. So what are our thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, it's got largely the same stuff as before, but this new agenda, which adds a much better fast advance game plan. You don't have to play like biotics or whatever to fast advance. You just sort of have it in house. I think it's pretty good. It can get blowout draws where you just win easily, even against good players. But it does feel pretty high variance in the small number of games I've tested with it. It's just the usual thing, right? If you don't draw hostile or what is it, too big to fail, you can definitely flounder early on, and then you don't have the bad publicity to have your fast advance agenda turned on either. So it's a bit of a double whammy.
I've definitely lost games against this outfit deck when I've been on ESA, but I feel like I've won the vast majority of them when I've been on ESA. I feel like ESA does kind of rip this thing apart a bit.
That was my experience. So like, I went to a circuit opener 2 weeks ago, and the Seattle guys came up, and they were all this is like this fast advance out list, the fast advance outfit list, and some of the innovations on it are like a Seattle thing in my view, and like I saw it on the day, like Joe, who won the tournament, was playing ESA, and every time Joe played outfit in the Swiss or the cut, just like topped up the outfit deck because you're playing a lot of agendas and there's no cost to stealing them, and so your incidental like dirty laundries or raindrops on archives just like pick up 2 points and you can win the game from there.
Also, it's a tempo thing when you're against ESA and then choosing what to sabo, right? Like R&D is a bigger risk than hand, but if you're saboing from hand, then you're losing tempo, right? And I think that for a lot of the part, this outfit deck wants to try to keep some of these things in hand. So I think you do get a decent number of sabos off of R&D, and if you can just spike those reg captures, you're really taking away almost any chance of the Corp winning.
Have you seen the big deal version of this deck?
Yeah, I have. I think I've only played against it a couple times though.
Yeah, I've played against that 2 or 3 times.
I think it's like
not as good.
It's hard. I mean, like, I definitely have had games where like they get like a trebuchet on HQ and like an border control and R&D, and then like they too big to fail, score hostile, and then they big deal out an Atlas, and then it's like once they big deal out the Atlas, it feels like Jesus. It's so hard. It can feel so hard to win from that spot. In my view, because like just getting 2 Atlas counters means that like it also like the problem with the reason I also don't love like the problem with the big deal Atlas is it means if you go tag me, they can 2 to the boom. But I don't know. I just think it's like regardless of how we feel about it, it just keeps doing well. Like it keeps
Yeah.
placing in all tournaments, which is just an interesting data point.
Yeah,
I guess
I
once you
haven't.
get out the Atlas, right? There's like we're on like a 2 or 3 turn clock at that point, but 2 or 3 turns is kind of a lot for ESA,
Yeah, I
especially
think that. Yeah, I think that's the thing is like I've played against this a little bit, all in casual events, but it's just been like any ESA I bring, it's like it's if I can find the botulus to put on the trebuchet, like it just blows. It feels like that wins the matchup in a lot of cases because it's just like if you can land 2 or 3 Trishtushkas on the outfit and then just play your normal game, like you're gonna access more cards than they're gonna be able to see to fast advance and score in a lot of cases. And the bad pub like adds up fast. And so like the I I haven't seen like too many decks that like commit like this one does to play all 3 HHNs and 3 Econ Warfarers. And maybe this gives it a little bit more legs in the ESA matchup. My worry is the ESA matchup, like event economy is going to keep up with the outfit pretty well. Like ESA recovers pretty quickly, and then you also have like every ESA ever has Deuces Wild, which ends up being like quite positive for clearing tags, and you can just hold it against the outfit in a lot of cases. But like as Eric is saying, like this deck keeps putting up results, and I think it's like a really good one to if you're thinking about stuff to bring to COs or maybe even nationals, like this is a really good baseline, and I think you can tune it for, maybe you go more all in on fast advance, maybe you like the big deal Atlas play, which I think is a good point that like big deal and Atlas is often way more than it's often better than scoring a 5-3 because you're getting all like 2 Atlas counters is worth probably more than 1 point, or like if it's only worth 1 point, something's gone real wrong.
I also think, like, for what it's worth, I mean, like, maybe the math is this. I think this outfit deck is better against Hoshiko and 4-9.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. I was going to say that. I think from my perspective of running as those 2 runners, I'm much more afraid of this than I am the big deal one.
And so then you do the value assessment where it's like, okay, so we think maybe the best Corp deck is like PE or AgInfusion or something, which is good against ESA. So less people bring ESA, which means they bring Hoshiko and 4-9, which are safe picks, and then you bring outfit because the Hoshikos are better versus PE. Like, we all think ESA is good, but it's like if the format is going to warp around decks that beat ESA, then it makes more sense to bring Hoshiko, and then it makes more sense to bring the outfit.
Yeah, no, I think that is kind of the logic I was trying to get at, and thanks for saying it very concisely and clearly. And I think that is a lot of how Outfit has done really well is, we haven't actually talked about Goodstuff 419. I think basically because that deck has not changed at all. Like, I was going to look up reference lists, and I was like, do I just pull up FA LMAO? Like,
it's not played. It's not. A lot of people don't play. It's not. It's arguably of the like. If we think ESA 4-9 and Hoshiko are the best 3 runners, it's played of the big 3 by far.
Yeah,
if you look at the tournament results.
Yeah, I think 419 is always the least popular competitive ID, and you tend to see it at like, it tends to have really high conversion rates, but not a lot of play in a lot of cases. Because it's like a really demanding deck usually, given that it usually has like 1 or 2 win condition cards, so to speak, and then just expects good play for the entire game. And if you screw that up, like you're often out of the game. But
yeah, I think it's sort of broadly what it always was, wasn't it? And it's got like okay matchups. It's fine against PE. It's still bad against sports. It's decent against the Asmari, although you can very easily lose it. And the influence is pretty open. You can sort of do whatever you like. You can put Turbine in there. I've tried that a little bit. So yeah, he's just kind of there. 419 is just still there. Hasn't really changed.
I don't know why I would play 4-9 over Hoshiko right
now. Good question.
Like I just think Hoshiko's better than 4-9 straight up.
So, are there any matchups where we'd much rather be 419 than Hoshiko? What about the Asmari?
I was going to say, what about the Asmari? Yeah.
I think the problem is that like the Anarch card pool's deep enough that we can just build a version of Hoshiko that's good versus Asmari. Like I think, for example, a deck that is like playing 3 Liberators and 3 Fermenters and daily casts and like is like drip economy focused is favored or whatever.
I mean, one
But-
of the things that makes the Asmari, the lore Asmari list again tough is that it does operate to some degree like PD, and 419 was always good against PD because of the jam tax and things like falsified, right?
I think,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's true. I think like the gulf between like. I think the gulf between Hoshiko and 4-9 in that matchup isn't like you can play Hoshiko like maybe 4-9 is favored versus Asmari or whatever, but I think the gulf between where Hoshiko is in that matchup and where 4-9 in that matchup is not very large.
I feel like I've beaten Hoshiko pretty steadily with the lore Asmari deck. I mean, well, that's not true. I mean, I've definitely lost against it a fair bit as well. I'm just trying to recall if I've been playing any 419 against any 419 with it. I'm not sure if I have been.
There's not a lot of 419 out there.
Yeah.
He's probably better against like CTM and asset stuff that isn't really being played.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's
even
fair.
like. I don't like 4-9. This is like a controversial take. I'm not a fan of playing 4-9 versus PE assets.
Versus what? Oh, the PE.
Really
Yes.
interesting. I
My
was about to say that I would feel like that's one of the matchups where you can actually make use of diversion of funds and like the economic pressure of being 419. But
As the PS player, like playing against 4-9, I am happy to play against 4-9 because often I'm keeping no ice openers often against 4-9. If they play diversion, I'm gonna res my Hokusais, my Warrior Trackers, my Bladder Warts, my Marylands. I have tons of ways to offshore my money. I need to be poor anyway to trigger my Bladder Warts. I don't play a lot of ice, so the bravados are often turned off on turn 1. Now, are they, even when they get the Miss Bones out, they still have to contend with the Warrior Trackers. If they draw the breakers early, I put them in a terrible vice. Because now they have to do the math of like, well, what if I lose my Bagalta? What if I lose my Amina? What if I lose my XYZ? Like, the fact that you have to get those breakers down if you draw them, in an unfortunate way. And so it just feels to me always like as someone who's also played 4-9 in the PS, I just feel like it's one of those matchups that looks like okay on paper, but I think when you actually play it, like so many things can go wrong. I mean, I also think PS is just a fucking broken deck right now. Like it's actually in like such an insane deck because other can like play really well and like control the board and then get into the late game, and because the deck does so much incidental net damage, you can like play well and like do the right thing, and you just end up with 10 cards in your deck at the end of like towards the end of the game, and you still have to probably steal an Obokata. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, when you're saying things, I was like, oh, this 419 actually sounds better against the PE than I thought. So with the exception of like maybe losing Amina, right? You just install the Buck Alter. Buck Alter's 3. Who cares if you lose the Amina? And then everything else though, right? Like the Missbones, the link for Warroid pinholes, so you can, not have to go through the ice, use Missbones to trash the Keeling, use Missbones to trash the Warroid. They trace 4, you have the extra link, you do have the diversions. You can hold back the bravados, but then once an ice goes down, because an ice does have to go down, right? You have a dedicated server for that.
I think the problem is like I agree with all of those things, but like you can draw a lot of really clunky hands in 4-9 versus PE assets. I really believe that, especially if you don't see the miss.
Right, so rather than turning this into a 30-minute discussion of 419, I think it's fair to say like in general we think like it's pretty close, like it's conceptually doing the same plan as Hoshiko, but the criminal card pool is not quite as broken as the Anarch one, so you have to be a little more creative, I think, with how you use slots and cards. And if you're planning to play 419, you should make sure you have a plan for, I mean, I guess we could call it like the 5 decks: the Fast Advance Outfit, the Econ Asmari, I have 2 different versions of PE as 2 decks, and the Loki Ag. And like, I would much rather be Hoshiko against Loki Ag than I would be 419.
Sure.
Though I think both have game, right? Like, both definitely have game, but, Hippo is like just such a good card in that matchup. It like feels significant.
You want to talk about Shaper, Jeff?
I mean, is there Shaper? Like, it's funny because it's like, if I look at this, it's like, all right, we're done talking about Shaper, right? Like, I think you can play APOC, and maybe it's like APOC Clot Shaper is like the secret meta tech. I don't know how you APOC AgInfusion, but if you can somehow APOC PE, which also seems like a challenge, and then you have Clot for the fast advance outfits and sports medals, like maybe you can find a room, but like Shaper was really bad before Borealis, and they didn't actually like Endurance was a very strong card, but even by the end of the Endurance being legal, people basically stopped playing Shaper because it was just better to be another faction.
This is some big cope. Okay, first off, Endurance and Shaper got Rozeki banned to start. And then secondly, when Parhelion came out, arguably one of the best decks in the format was a Shaper deck. It was actually so good that it got Wu banned.
Fair enough.
I think the problem is, if you look back at the previous year, Shaper's eaten 3 bans. And Shaper, I think everyone agreed before Borealis, was the weakest runner faction by far. And now they ate 3 bans on the most powerful cards. And now we're back to them being the weakest. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's only going to get worse after rotation. I actually do not think it will get better, because right now, one of the only reasons to play Shaper, maybe, is that you have access to misdirection at paid ability speed.
Mm-hmm.
You're the only faction with tag removal.
The bands that you're talking about, though, Eric, I mean, like, you know, those were Shaper cards, but not necessarily, you know, cards that were used to build the best Shaper decks in comparison to any other decks, right? Like,
well,
Rozeki.
I mean, World Tree. Rozeki was everywhere. Endurance was everywhere. Wu banned because of World Tree is like a exclusive to Shaper thing, right? And that was probably the like, when you think about like powerful stuff, like maybe someone, and like I definitely played around with it right after the ban list, like a World Tree ALO list. Like you can actually find the World Tree consistently. I don't know that you want to be on World Tree against PE.
I think it's not good enough. I mean, the problem also is, like, it turns out one of the big synergy points in that deck, I honestly believe, is the fact that you can tutor for Harbinger.
Yeah.
And you turn your Harbinger into 3 credits, or a draw, and then you turn it into a draw and 3 credits down the line, and it's like a really good value trade, getting you any breaker out of your deck.
I mean, I just want to point out that like the big tournament that came around when Wu was a possibility, when Big Wu was a possibility, was the CBI tournament, right? And I think
Reality Plus dunked on that matchup, so like you couldn't play Big Wu into Reality Plus. You kind of just got slammed.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I mean, I think we were.
That's right. Yeah, because my argument was going to be you didn't even see that much of it, and it wasn't in the top cut. But yeah, that's it. It was because of R plus. That's right.
I think we were a month into that format, and what everyone who was like the really competitive players realized was that, okay, so if we're gonna ban a piece out of R plus, Wu's just gonna run the format, like because I mean that's how I felt in testing. I remember testing against D, and we were like, everything that isn't R plus, you just don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And I remember playing the Continentals format. Like Shaper almost ran the table, like a year ago, almost a year ago for the Continental season that was in Midnight Sun.
Yeah, that was Pad Tap's Lat. Pad Tap Strip Lat was like the premier Shaper deck, and like was probably the only time in the last 4 years that Shaper's been like probably
Shaper
the
won
deck.
Worlds. Shaper won Worlds this year, Jeff.
I mean, but
Okay,
Shaper won
but that
will, like, despite itself, not necessarily because of.
I think if you give Sokka a Hoshiko deck, I don't know that there's any edge there. Like that Shaper deck was an APOC deck that had good tech, and I'm not like shitting on Sokka's deck choice at all. Like he made a good call, but I don't think people look at that results and go, oh yeah, Shaper was the best runner deck to bring to that event.
But this is peak no true Scotsman. I'm telling you that Shaper won Worlds, and you're like, whoa, not a real Shaper deck. I mean, come on. Like,
okay, wait.
This is coming from the mouth of the guy who won Worlds, though.
I mean, I think Will thinks that deck is not good anymore. for
Yeah, I
variety.
mean, because it's not good anymore, and it was a good call then, but like, I don't think that was like, I mean, this is like saying, oh yeah, oh shoot, Hate Bear wasn't the best runner deck in, I forget which worlds that was, right? Like, because it didn't win. Like, no, you can have a really good result that isn't always like guaranteed. That doesn't mean, oh, this deck won, therefore it is best. Like that's
I agree, but my point isn't that Shaper was the best. My point is that Shaper was good enough to be able to win worlds. That is
okay.
It was a functional faction. Right now, it is non-functional as a faction.
Yeah. We're back to that status quo.
I mean, I think all like after rotation, I mean, they're gonna lose Misdirection. Why would you ever play Shaper when you could play Anarch? Why would you ever play Shaper when you could play Criminal? I think it's gonna get worse. There's no reason to play Shaper in competitive Netrunner right now. That is my honest view.
Can I ask a question? Honest question. So, it took me a while to become a competitive player. It took me a long time to become pretty decent in this game. And when I did, I think the Shaper boat had already left. So, like, what exactly was so dominant about Shaper into the meta when it was dominant? Like, and because the question that I always have for myself is like, well, like, why is Shaper so bad? Because I remember when I was not a good player, all the good players like were on Shaper.
Yeah, so it was two things. It was like the very first Shaper dominance was like prepaid Kate, and that was basically like it was just the best event. It was like the way that econ was set up, like the event engine was like solid enough, and then SMC clone ship was like your way to reliably and efficiently answer everything the Corp could do to you. And then at some point we like that deck fell out. It just like got kind of power crept mostly, though also pieces started rotating.
It couldn't deal with assets. It couldn't deal with the asset decks.
Yeah.
In a way that Wizard could.
Yep.
And it had Barista and things like that.
I mean, Priest is just not that good of a card. Like, you slot it in Shaper because you have to, but it is like so much worse than a lot of your other options. And then at some point, eventually, like, people kind of figured out that Haley was a 5 to 6 click runner, and were able to just like play a value engine, usually centered around Aesop's. Like, fan site artist colony just meant that you could tutor responses to like divergent Corp plans at instant speed, and so that's what made Shaper powerful. Was like I'm gonna have a toolbox that answers the Corp threat like and shut it down very hard, and that's going to be the game plan. And people didn't like that, and so they stopped printing those cards, or they started banning those cards. And so Shaper's been in this miasma where people think that Shaper's like a big rig faction, and if it's big rig and efficient, it's too efficient, and so it gets banned, because it turns out if you print a really efficient Shaper card, it's just always going to be better to bring it into a faction that has real economy. And that like Haley rotating, I think, is like can't be understated how much of the entire Shaper card pool was balanced around Haley installing 2 cards and selling one of them to Aesop's. Like it was kind of a clickless 3 credits when you set up your deck properly. And so then you were playing stuff like Cash and Harbinger. So you were making a ton of money off of that. And it like the whole Shaper card pool was balanced around that. And then that rotated out. And so there just hasn't been an econ replacement that even comes close to it. And a lot of the stuff that has been printed feels like it was still expecting Haley and Ponchap to be like viable engines.
So is it that like the Shapers lost like enough individual cards, including a couple key IDs, and then other individual cards were sort of redesigned against or designed against after they were just thought to be too strong? Because it sounds like, because to me that's what it sounds like. There were X number of individual cards that really made it dominant, and at this point, that entire collection of X cards has been either rotated out and not reprinted in any sort of way, or reimagined in any way, or has just been sort of redesigned against.
I think the question of like why is Shaper bad from a historical lens is actually incredibly complicated, and probably deserves its own video. I think like there's so many factors. So like first off, prepaid K, arguably the time that Shaper was ever the best was Laguna Lock Haley with Satcon, Tapeworm, Levy. Absolutely miserable to play against. Shaper players might tell you, oh, it was actually fine. It was not fine. It was disgusting disgusting run of deck. But there have been times, like, past that even, when Shaper was good. Like, it was doing Circus Haley stuff. It was doing Pirate Haley was really good for a while. Like, there's all these different decks that, like, are interesting. I think there's a couple things that really hurt, that really sort of cut the legs out from under Shaper once Null Signal took over. The first was Levy rotating. A lot of Shaper decks were predicated on the idea that you would use up your resources, burn out, and then levy your deck back together. Like, especially like Pirate Haley, for example. Like, that was the whole idea behind Pirate Haley, is you could play 1 or 2 levies and like be fine. You just can't do that anymore. I think also the game's gotten a lot faster from when Shaper was good. So Shaper, like now, like every deck, like Rashida's out, the decks are really fast, they're really aggressive. You have cards like Seamless Launch. Remote Camp isn't nearly as good as it used to be because of, I would argue, cards like Seamless Launch. Also, the upgrades have gotten better. Things like that. I think also, once Null Signal took over, StimHack rotated. Stim was a 2 to 3 of mandatory in every Shaper deck for the history of the game. And it was a large part of why Shaper was good, because SMC StimHack shored up the faction's one big weakness, which is that it's soft to early aggression. I mean, most Corp's game plan versus Shapers was to rush early because they understood that the pawn shop levy econ engine smoked you. You had no inevitability. Now you have Overclock, which is just so much worse. Like, straight up, like, we're talking about 4 cards versus 9, and the Corp has gotten faster. And there's no levy, so you have no long-term econ. Like, you just have a finite amount of money in your Shaper deck now. So
you have a finite amount of money, and it's like so much less card efficient than just playing liberated accounts. Like, liberated accounts often has the amount of money on it that like the entire Shaper deck, well, like 3 liberated accounts often has more money than a lot of the Shaper in faction cards when you combine like twice or 3 times as many slots. Like,
it's like, it's not even all, like, it's more complicated. It's not just what I said. Like, it's not just what Jeff. It's really complicated.
Yeah, it's also like, when you look at like, oh, how can they advance a game plan that actually gets them to accessing agendas proactively? Like, Anarch has Stargate, Criminal also has Stargate, right? It's like,
there's no indexing anymore.
There's no indexing anymore, and there's like, your breakers are actually like the worst of all 3 factions. Like,
yeah, it used to be Criminal had the worst breakers.
Yeah,
now they have Amina but
yeah, and Ngolo is like your premier breaker, and Ngolo, like, it's really powerful, but also sucks to use over and over and over again. Like, it is atrociously expensive, and it's like Unity, what is it, like Unity, Echelon, and like Paperclip is just like, it's less efficient than your options in other factions, and so it's like your econ's worse, your breakers are worse, you have really no plans that forward the game. Like, I think Deep Dive's a really cool card. I hope it gets more time in the sun, like, it becomes really strong at some point, but it's like super demanding and orthogonal to what what Shapers can do well right now anyway. Like, and so it's like, there's just this long, different list of complex interrelated issues for Shaper.
And I think it's hard. It's obviously hard to design for Shaper. In my opinion, like, you have a really hard problem, which is that, like, they need to change. I mean, I think they're trying to, but like, the design philosophy, if the community's image of Shaper is like the big rig control combo faction, it's really hard to print cards for that deck as a runner, because like, the game doesn't work really well when the runner's the control. It works really well when the Corp's the control. And I also think, like, I mean, they're obviously trying, right? Like, they push the power level of the Shaper cards in Borealis so much. I mean, 2 of the, like, World Tree, Wu got banned for World Tree Sins or whatever, but like, Endurance and World Tree were obviously both like them trying to like figure out, like, maybe Shaper can do something really powerful, and both of them
and
got
do it
banned,
run based, right? Like,
yeah. I
Yeah,
think yeah, it's a hard counterfactual. I mean, I think probably the boat should have been more linked to charge, but we have a
Yeah.
year of hindsight. Like hard, like at the time, who could have said, right?
Yeah, no, it's like yeah. Anyway, let's
Yeah. I didn't mean to take this too off topic. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I was going to start wrapping us up anyway, because I think we've actually covered all the decks. We haven't really talked about Op. I will say, even as the diehard Op lover, Op has not really put up results too much. It's actually done okay at a couple of, like, well, I guess all circuit opener sizes are actually kind of the same everywhere in the world. So it's done well in a few COs. I think no one's quite figured out what the op list is, or if there are multiple op lists. So I'm hoping someone figures that out. Any of you guys have quick thoughts on op, or otherwise we can do a final thoughts on the meta as a whole.
I think the surprising me about op is that it is not played as much. I think everyone, I mean, at least internally in our discussions, I remember we had discussions about how, like, when we did our sort of like rough internal list of winners and losers on the ban list, we all thought that endurance being banned would be really good for ob. I can't really speak to why it's not doing better. I don't understand ob very well, and I don't play it that much, because I am out in the woods in Loki AgInfusion land. I've not played regular Netrunner for a while. But it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Managarm op list, the fast advance op list, and the mutually assured like combo lists, like you can blend, you can basically take those three different things, blend them, or try and go, to the extremes of any individual one of those. And I feel like there should be something there. I don't know if people are just waiting for dedicated deck builders to go and find it for them, or if it's actually just turns out to just not have game against Essa and Hoshiko and 419 at the same time.
Can I?
You think they actually don't want to play it in person because it's too annoying? Is that a factor?
I mean, that could be the case too. I personally really like playing op in person, but I'm also a sicko who loves op, and will probably just play it regardless of viability for a while.
Okay, we can just go to the Whiteblade corner. Do you want to talk about Loki AgInfusion? Because we just didn't talk about it.
We didn't talk about it. We just kind of said, yeah, it's probably one of the best decks. And like,
well, come on.
No, but people are playing it. Like, it came like.
No, it is.
It finished first in the accelerated meta test. I forget. This is the March one.
People are actually playing it now.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's true. Like, it's not people actually, like, 5 people are playing it now. And every time they play it, they do well.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I wonder, like, I really think about this Loki AgInfusion deck. I wonder why more people aren't playing it. Like, it really. Well,
I mean, like, I think it's really, to me, the answer is pretty clear, and it's that people aren't tournament optimization machines. They are fun optimization machines, and winning is part of the fun, but not the exclusive source of enjoyment.
You think that means we should think about how we weigh the circuit opener results?
Potential. I mean, yeah, potentially, right?
Do you think, like, okay, I think, for example, like, let's say Nationals was next week, Jeff, and all the snare bears were gonna go.
Yeah.
How many of the snare bears, if we thought Loki AgInfusion was actually the best deck in the format, how many of the snare bears do you think would actually play Loki AgInfusion?
Half.
I think it would be like me and D, and that's it. You think John and Patrick would play Loki AgInfusion? No offense to Patrick or John. I think that's not gonna happen.
I mean, I might learn how to play it. I thought it would actually also be a cool kind of thing to go around and just hear, if Nationals was tomorrow, what would we bring? So thanks for getting us there.
Yeah, maybe that's actually a good way to close this off. Is if there is a Nationals, next week, what decks are you bringing? Eric, you're obviously bringing AgInfusion. What runner are you bringing? We also didn't mention Tag Me Zaya.
I actually don't know. I actually, this is Whiteblade erasure. I don't know if I'd play Loki AgInfusion. What Nationals is it?
You're just saying.
Okay, let's say it's a 40-person Nationals somewhere in Europe.
I love it's like Casablanca or something. I mean,
Or,
I think,
you know what? Let's you know what? We'll call it. We can say to be relevant to you, it'll be West Coast, US.
okay, so here's the problem I am facing in my life, John. Right? In the
Yes,
past
please.
6 months, I have fucking smoked people up and down the West Coast with Loki AgInfusion. Like, just fucking dominated tournaments I hit with this deck. It's free. It's a free win machine. The problem is that every runner I play against is playing like 2 to 3 tech cards just for me, because they've done the math on like have to play me in tournament. So like I'm playing against people on like 2 copies of Hush and a Hunting Grounds, just to smoke my deck. So it's like I don't know what to do about that. Like I think I have to not play it anymore, because if everyone's gonna commit 2 to 3 tech slots to beating the fucking deck, like I can't play the deck anymore.
You're gonna get Jeff's YouTube banned with all the F-bombs.
We're past the first 30 seconds of the video. It's all good.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I might learn how to play, Loki Ag a little bit more, because I think it's pretty strong. I think I bring Hoshiko, with Devil Charm. If Loki Ag is a thing, I think that's probably a good reason to slot a Hush or a Chisel or a Hunting Grounds, sort of, maybe. But I definitely bring Hoshi, I think, even though I've been almost exclusively playing Essa, but that's only because Essa is really fun to play. I'm not decided between Kiko or Ma, to be perfectly honest. I've seen some really good Kiko games where it's just been Value City, and then you just end up, locking R&D and HQ with new Turning Wheel, twinning. A lot. And then so definitely one of those Hoshi decks, and then either the Laura's Mari deck, or maybe I do learn AgInfusion.
Can I ask you, this is something I was thinking about as a thought experiment. John, you're gonna go to East Coast Nationals in I guess it is East Coast Nationals in July, right?
Yeah, I'm playing.
Let's say for argument's sake it's gonna be in the same format. Would you pack? Let's say your deck can't beat AgInfusion. Like it has. Would you play a tech card to beat AgInfusion in your Renner deck?
I mean, to think about a tech card for AgInfusion, I mean, you can also think about a tech card that's helpful in other matchups as well, right?
Let's say Hush, because Hunting Grounds you don't have the influence, and Hush is like maybe good. Like Hush is marginally good.
Hunting Grounds also is like cool. Like they can't get subroutines off of other ice, but if there is an enemy behind the Loki, you're dead anyway.
Well, but what the Hunting Grounds does is it means that when they AgInfusion you into the Loki, you bounce off the Loki. Like it means they can never AgInfusion into the Loki ever again.
Yeah, you just end the run and then run back through the server.
Turns off the whole idea of the deck.
The Hunting Grounds just completely stuffs it.
Does it?
Yeah,
maybe,
for sure.
Maybe, yeah, it's like, okay, they try and boop you out of their server that they're trying to score an agenda out of, right? They boop you into the Loki. You just don't take the net damage and the run, and now you can run the server with the oboe in it again.
Oh, because the Loki's protecting the tree stay.
The trees, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. I got.
I guess I'll ask this question to you, Jeff. Like you're gonna play in East Coast Nationals probably. Would you play a tech card for Loki AgInfusion?
Yeah, I will almost certainly be slotting 1 to 2 tech cards for Loki AgInfusion.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
I would at the same time, I don't know that anyone's going to bring it, but I don't feel super confident in the matchup. Like I'm not like I know they're like we saw Sam take it right down to the wire at Worlds, but I'm not that good of a player. And so like I'm going to lean on tech when I can for my worst matchups, and that's just how I'm going. That's how I would approach a deck like this. Is
sure.
Now if I'm playing Essa, like probably what I do, like probably I need to, if I'm to choose a runner deck, I need to practice the deck I want to play, which is Essa, because I feel okay against it in like the other matchups. I haven't played the PE matchup a ton, but I'm kind of like, we'll just sprint at each other and one of us wins, and like kind of okay with those odds maybe. But this matchup, like if that feels unwinnable, like then I'm gonna switch to like a Hoshiko and tech it for that. And like Because it's the AgInfusion and PE feel like they're really good against ESSA, and so I'm assuming that's what they'll be. If I'm trying to make the cut, I'm kind of assuming I'll be against those, and so it becomes like, okay, I include 1 to 2 tech cards for this, good runner fundamentals, and then I need to think about solving my outfit matchup if possible.
Like, that's so interesting to me, Jeff, because it's like, I think for like my guess at East Coast Nationals is we will have 1 person playing Loki AgInfusion and not even.
Yeah, I think that might be right, but it also, people might watch this video and hear us. Like, this is the thing. Like, if people it's one of those decks where like people start believing the hype and start putting in reps. Like, it's a really solid deck. Like, it is.
I don't think that's even true because, like, I don't think that's actually true. I think people aren't going to believe the hype, or they still won't anyway, because they just don't want to play it. Because it's like, I don't know, like, maybe no one listens to me, and that's the truth. But it just feels like I and all other good players have basically been like, Loki AgInfusion is somewhere between like really good to like maybe best deck in format past like 4 months, and like no one gives a shit. Like, why start believing it now?
Because we've got real in-person events for the first time in a couple of years. Like,
well, maybe that's the answer. I'm not asking like rhetorically. Like, I actually maybe that is the answer.
But let's go back on topic of it. So to answer your question, like, in my heart, like, what am I going to bring to like my CO next weekend? It's going to be ESSA and Op. Probably some kind of combo rush hybrid.
Those are good decks.
I think they're really solid decks. I don't, it's like, people have seen me play the Op a lot, so I need to think about, like, do I switch 1 to 2 cards up to keep people on their toes, or do I just say, no, I think I've got a good fundamentals and sure. see how that rides? Because, like, if I'm going to claim Op as good, I should put my money where my mouth is at some point.
Patrick, what would you play?
Yeah, now we can hear
in a national. Yeah, I mean, no, I guess I'd probably play Hoshiko as well. I mean, Reg 419 is always an option as well, but I feel pretty good about Hoshiko at the moment. And as Corp, like, the simplest option if you had only a week would be to play the Laura Asmari. And I think Glacier Asmari's actually been really good as well, and I've had plenty of experience playing that, so I would consider that. But yeah,
it's Worlds all over again.
Except I hope it's actually better than it was at Worlds. But yeah.
I mean, there's no endurance. Like, it has to be just an upgrade.
Yeah.
I think I would probably. So I'm gonna play in a circuit opener in a week in Seattle. I think I'm definitely gonna play PS. I think PS is very good. And for the runner side, it depends, honestly. I've been trying to, like, I'm afraid of playing ESSA. So it's either between ESSA or Tag Messiah for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bad experience. Like, I just played that circuit opener 2 weeks ago, and I just got fucking torn up on my decks, and it felt bad. And I don't know why that happened. Just, like...
What were you on?
I was on Tag Messiah and Loki AgInfusion. The Loki AgInfusion games I lost because, like, I had 2 Hushes played against me in 3 games. I was like, fuck that. The Zaya games... The Zaya just didn't feel good. I think it's again, we don't have time. I think it's a tough format for Zaya, actually. Tougher than I think we thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I like the ESSA deck a lot. So it's between ESSA and Tag Messiah. I really like Tag Messiah. I always love making it work. There's not a ton of kill in the format, and I also think the Asmari deck is a fine matchup for it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe wrong, but I really feel that way. So yeah, we'll see. Probably Tag Messiah or ESSA, leaning towards Tag Messiah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Thanks everyone for watching, and I will plug to the top, but to come out to the Pandemonium circuit opener here if that's in a convenient drivable range. If not, you should come to the New York one instead. Because everyone in the world who watches these videos is within easy driving distance of New York City and Boston. So
Can I plug Cascadia?
Oh yeah, you should plug Cascadia.
Hey everybody, Cascadia, August 12th to 13th. It's gonna be in Seattle. It's gonna be a big event. I'll say it. It's gonna be the largest event in the United States this year because Worlds is in Europe. I really recommend to come. It's a really beautiful part of the United States. It's a really beautiful time of year. We're gonna have a lot of really awesome players there. We're gonna have it streamed. Jeff, you're gonna be there.
I am. Yeah.
So if you want to get your cards, your obs signed by Jeff, he will sign your obs. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really good time. And if you're sort of like in the area or like you want to have discussions about flights or where to stay, like shoot me a message. We'll figure something out. I'm always happy to help organize. Yeah, it's going to be a really big event. We commissioned 2 altards for it, so it's really exciting. So yeah, come on, Cascadia.
Can I just plug Radlands because I'm trying to get people into that game?
Oh,
the best Netrunner players and you're not playing Netrunner.
Fucking
Can I
Christ.
plug Hive as well?
Can we?
Thanks,
I'd like to plug Flesh and Blood.
Okay. We've gone off the
Poker's
rails.
a pretty good game. Poker's a fun game as well, right?
Oh,
Yeah, poker
goodness.
is very fun.
All right. Well,
Thanks,
thanks everyone.
Jeff. Thanks for-
Thanks,
Great
Jeff.
chat.